If you try to sell to everyone, you'll sell to no one. You see, there are a lot of authors out there who are trying to sell their books to everyone. They believe that everyone should have a copy of their book and love it and cherish it on their bookshelves. Maybe that's you, or maybe you're struggling to sell books because you just don't know who your audience is. Well, today I want to give you just a few steps that you can follow to really identify your bullseye audience. And by the way, in the description of this video, I have a free download for you. I'm calling it the Your Audience Guidebook, and it will walk you through these steps, step by step, so that you can identify your audience. So go into this description, or you can go straight to launchmissioncreative.com/bullseye to catch that guidebook right now. By the way, my name is Travis D. Peterson. I am an award-winning children's book author. I'm also a book designer, and I coach indie authors through the process of publishing so that they can create profitable, wholesome books that kids will love and adults will cherish. Let's get going. Let's look at step number one in the process of identifying your bullseye audience. Now, why do I call it that, first of all? A lot of people might say your ideal audience, your niche audience, your target audience. I like to think of it as your bullseye audience. Now, why do I use that phrase? Well, if you think about a bullseye, I actually have one here. This is my son's, I guess, soft dart target. And if you think of your target audience, that means you're trying to hit this target basically anywhere. But I want you to zone in on just the bullseye, because this is the group of people who are hungriest for your book. They are ready to devour it. Now, a regular target is made up of several concentric circles, right? So the bullseye here is inside a slightly larger circle, and that's inside of another circle. And these are all different audiences that will be attracted to your book, but really that bullseye is the one that's most hungry for your book. So that's what we're trying to aim for. That's what we want to find. And so I thought today I would just kind of mention this book, Grumpy Monkey by Suzanne Lang. It's a really fun book if you haven't read it. It's very popular, so I'm sure there's a pretty good chance you have read it. But Suzanne, you may think that Suzanne is just aiming for anyone to read her book. You may think that she wants it on the shelves of every child around the world, but it's just not the case. Suzanne knows exactly who her audience is, and she knows how to reach them. She knows who is hungry for her book. So we'll be talking about that a little bit as we go through here. But first of all, Suzanne's book is not geared toward kids who like monkeys. That's a pretty generic audience, right? No, it's actually a series of books that brings awareness to confusing feelings that kids can have, like grumpiness. And if you look at the whole series, you'll see that she really doubles down on that with a lot of her different titles. She explores several different feelings and emotions that kids can have. And frankly, even adults can have these big emotions. And it's just, a really fun story. So I highly recommend it. But that's just an example of what we're going for. Suzanne has a specific audience in mind, and it's those families who want to help their kids face those big emotions that are going to be most hungry for her books. So let's get started. The very first step in how to find your bullseye audience is to identify your book's message. Now, I've talked about this in previous videos, and I talk about it in my book, Indie Author's Dozen. But I like to think of your message being made up of two different parts. The first part is your book's benefit, and the second part is its core value. Now, what's the difference between those two? Your book's benefit is well, it's the positive outcome that comes from reading your book. So for Suzanne Lang's book, Grumpy Monkey, you could say that the positive outcome is laughter. I mean, it's a fun book to read. It also stirs up these conversations about big, confusing emotions for families. So you can start that conversation with your kids. Now, the core value is that it's okay to be grumpy sometimes. Can you see the difference? The core value is the belief or principle that the reader gains. Each book has a balance of benefits and core values. My first children's book, Ada and the Helpers, it was inspired by my daughter, and it brings awareness to hearing loss and hearing devices, teaches the ASL alphabet. And so those are the benefits of the book. It brings awareness to hearing loss. It teaches the ASL alphabet. But the core value of the book is to help others. That's sort of the moral or message of the story. But again, your book's message is a balance of benefits and core values. And you really need to identify what your message is in your book. Now, let's go to step number 2 for identifying or defining your bullseye audience. And that is to start brainstorming keywords. In my book and in previous videos, I've talked about my primer formula for developing your story, and it really covers every area of your book. It helps with self-editing and building your beta feedback for creating content to promote the book, all different things. It's such a helpful tool, but it can also help you to brainstorm keywords. You see, you can start to, after you've identified your message, you can start to create what I call a keyword bank, and sort of grouping those keywords into different buckets. And in my case, I like to use the primer formula buckets. 6 buckets: the plot, its readability, imagery or illustrations, the message, which we just talked about, entertainment or even education, and representation, how you're representing maybe a minority culture or a disability or an illness, something like that. So you can start to brainstorm different keywords in those different groups or your own buckets. And those keywords, as you start to see them, sort of the best ones bubble up to the top, rise up to the top. That's going to help you to identify your target audience, or your bullseye audience, as I like to say. Now, step number 3 is, once you have those keywords in place, it's nice to be able to turn to Amazon and start identifying which categories your book falls into. And so one thing you can do is you can go onto Amazon and you can look at those categories and start picking out the ones that are most relevant to your keywords and your message, your book, and start making a list of those categories. And after you've made a list of, 8 or 10 categories, star the ones that are most relevant, maybe the top 3, because when you list a book on KDP, you can choose 3 categories. So that's a good way to do it. Hopefully, I don't know if you're going to be using KDP or if you're going to be printing offset. That doesn't matter so much here, but it certainly helps to have those categories in mind when you are developing your bullseye audience. And so after you have developed your message, started filling up your keyword bank, then you can start selecting Amazon categories. And after you have done all three of these, you have a much better picture of your bullseye audience. And as I was saying, if you can identify this audience, the audience that is most hungry for your book, suddenly you realize that there are larger audiences, which each larger, broader audience may not be as hungry, but they'll still be interested in your book. And if you have three categories, three different categories, those are three potential bullseye audiences that you could start to aim for. And so that's something to keep in mind as you're identifying these audiences. So once you have that bullseye audience identified, then you can start to identify even larger, broader audiences that are still relevant and still connected to that very hungry bullseye audience. Now, one more thing after you have identified your audience is I want you to take it even one step closer. And I want you to visualize two very specific people in your bullseye audience. You may have heard the word avatar before, and I'm not talking about the movie. An avatar is a sort of a fictional character that helps you to visualize your audience. And I actually have two avatars that I want you to visualize. The first one is your reader avatar. And if you're a children's book author, this is likely a child. And so you want to think about sort of a fictional child character that most represents your bullseye audience. Now, if we look at Suzanne Lang's book here, I think we can begin to visualize the kind of person who would enjoy this book. Now, I want you to get very specific. I want you to think about maybe whether they would be a boy or a girl. Maybe they are of a specific nationality, or what part of the country do they live in, or the world, what part of the world they live in. You could think about what their interests are and what they enjoy doing. I think one avatar that we could make up for Grumpy Monkey is that maybe it's a boy. Boys and girls can both like monkeys, of course, but maybe it's a boy who is very active. He loves monkeys. He loves swinging on the monkey bars, and he has some big emotions. And so that's my avatar. Maybe he's like an 8-year-old boy. So even think about the age of the avatar that you're aiming for. So as you can see, if you can begin to visualize, even give him a name. Let's call him Jacob. Jacob is an 8-year-old boy who loves monkeys. He's a very active boy, and he has big emotions. Can you imagine now that if you're able to visualize an avatar, a reader avatar like that, how easy it might be to then not only know who your bullseye audience is, but know where to find them and where to attract them as a bookseller and as an author. What an amazing opportunity that is. Now, the other avatar is your buyer avatar. You see, most likely Jacob isn't buying the book. He may be finding it in the library, That's true. Or he may be too busy outside on the playground. You see, his buyer avatar, your buyer avatar, is most likely Jacob's mom or dad or grandparent, maybe a teacher, a librarian. You see, the buyer avatar is different from the reader avatar. How do you visualize your buyer avatar? Now, let's say for Grumpy Monkey, that buyer avatar is Jacob's mom, and she's maybe in her mid 30s. She is maybe she used to be a teacher, but she's a stay-at-home mom now, and potentially even homeschooling her kid who has a lot of energy and some big emotions, and she's looking for opportunities to start a conversation with Jacob about his emotions. What an amazing opportunity you have to identify your buyer avatar and your reader avatar. So now you have your bullseye audience, you have your reader avatar, you have your buyer avatar, all identified. And just think of the opportunities you have to market your book now, promote it to the right audience. Now, again, you can find this guidebook that will help you through the whole process of defining your bullseye audience at launchmissioncreative.com/bullseye. And I invite you to go download that free resource. If this content is helpful for you and you are a children's book author and you're looking for great tips for how to go through the journey of self-publishing, I invite you to not only like this video, but hit the subscribe button, follow me along, because I really want to offer a lot of great content for you. And I appreciate you watching today. And if this was helpful, I encourage you to go to this video right here, which is where I talk about what it means to have a hungry audience and how to not only find them, but attract them.